And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin Bible podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final episode of this week of Talkin Bible with Rohan Bell and Shannon Moyer. Hello, Shannon.
G'day, Rohan. How you going?
I'm doing good. We're nearly done. We can go home soon. But we've got a great conversation to have first.
We do.
We do. This is a fun conversation, actually. This is Jesus at his rhetorical best. Let's
This
put it
is
that way.
Jesus picking a fight.
Oh yeah, he's picking a fight. All right. This is that final week. This is showdown week, Passion Week.
Yes.
It's worth mentioning that. I've talked about this on the podcast a few times this year when we're in Passion Week. Jesus enters into Jerusalem in his final week on a mission, and most of his strongest words are reserved for this week. Partly because he knows this is his last chance to straighten out the fact, or call the religious elite, those in power, on their bad behavior. But also too because he knows that his mission is to go to the cross.
Yeah.
And so he's going out of his way. In other times when he would often just walk through the crowd and disappear, and he probably had times he wanted to say things, but he didn't. But by the time we get to Passion Week, he's picking a fight.
Yeah. He's going for it.
He knows that this is going to end in him being arrested and crucified, and that's actually what he wants.
Yeah. He spent 3 years with the Pharisees.
Yeah.
People, it's the Pharisees killed Jesus.
Sadducees.
3 years with the Pharisees, and they didn't kill him.
You've been listening to Marty, haven't you? on the Beaver podcast. Yes, exactly right. The Sadducees were the ones who put him to death.
3 days with the the Sadducees, and he's dead.
Yeah, exactly. The Pharisees didn't like him. But
for good reason.
Yeah, good luck. He had a go at them.
He went to town on them.
Yeah, he was calling them out on their behavior.
For good reason as well.
Yeah.
And this is one of those verses where he went to town.
He went to town is the good metaphor to use because, he uses all kinds of colourful hyperbole, all kinds of over-the-top rhetoric here. He's not holding his, what's the word? Not packing his,
holding back his punches.
Not at this time. He's going for it. He's calling them on their duplicity, on their hypocrisy. So I'll tell you a story as we get through this, but where do you want to go? Because we probably won't read all the passages. It's Matthew 23, 1 to 36.
Yes. Earlier in the week, I said, if I could go back in time, it would have been at the beginning of, Jesus' ministry where he put out his euangelion to say, here's the beginning.
Yep.
This would also be one of those.
You wouldn't mind being a fly on the wall in the temple
just
court?
Being on the edge of the temple court going, well, this is awesome.
That's right.
Because this is a fight that I think I would like to have seen.
Yeah. This is not gentle Jesus, meek and mild.
No, this is. No. I think people would say, even in some of the betrayals of this fight, it's just a loud argument. I don't think this was a loud argument.
No, this is pretty intense.
This is a throwdown. This is a massive fight.
Yeah.
This is.
And bear in mind that around this time he's also cleansed the temple.
He's just cleared the
temple,
market out.
Yeah, and with a whip. Yeah.
Well, and. Oh,
I don't know. Have you seen the Chosen for this season 5's Chosen episodes yet? Like at the movies?
No.
So I've seen the first 2 episodes of the movie. I'm going to go this Saturday and watch the next 2. I'm not going to be able to watch the first the final 3 episodes, or I'll be there all day, and I haven't got time for that. But they did the cleansing of the temple scene, and it's next level. You can actually watch bits of it on the Bible app and stuff. They do a superb job of what Jesus did here, which is he really went to town against the duplicity. What Jesus is going at. You're going to see it in some of the scriptures we read here. Things like you stop those from entering. You're the blind leading the blind. You're holding back. You travel all over the world to make a disciple of yourself, but you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are, and all kinds of horrible stuff. And he's so frustrated because these are the people who were tasked with being the light bearers, being the ones who were to bring the good news. Yeah. And they had not only failed, they had abused their position so much so that they were using the very people they were called to love for their own gain. And that's what Jesus doesn't have a place for that.
Jesus was rocking the temple, literally. He was like, and even for the Jews that were in that part of the temple, it was full on. But for the Gentiles that were on the outer part of the temple, I reckon they were scaling the walls
to see what's going on.
to see what was
inside.
going on. Jesus is really going for it. We've got to see what's going on. Like,
that's
it
right.
would have been amazing.
Yes, yeah.
So let's
All right, get us
let's read a
started. Where
little
are we
bit
gonna
of
go?
it.
Yeah, sure.
Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples. So he's not even speaking to the teachers.
No.
He's
They're
basically
listening.
he's got them around,
Yep.
and now he's pointing them out. He's
Yeah.
calling them out,
Yeah.
basically. So he's speaking to the crowds now and to his disciples. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So Moses' seat is if scripture is being read,
Yep.
it's going to come from Moses' seat.
Yep. It's
Okay.
they're the ones who represent the Mosaic law. They're the ones who represent the ways of God, is what
Yeah.
he's saying. These
Yep.
people here represent the ways of God.
So you must be careful to do everything they tell you.
Just stop there for a minute. At that point, they're all going, yeah, finally you're saying something we agree
Right.
with.
So you can just imagine them. They're like, yes,
Yes, you should
thank
look
you.
down. Yes.
You should do everything we tell you.
Yes.
But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach.
So
Now-
there's an idiom that's transferred into our common vernacular that people may not realize. It's the words of Jesus.
Words of
Practice what they
Jesus,
preach.
right
Exactly.
there. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their
Yeah, you're right. They make extra wide prayer boxes.
Yep.
I don't know what
yeah. So these are called
phylacteries. Is it?
phylacteries.
Phylacteries. Just a fancy word.
Wide, and their tassels on their garments long.
So they're showing off their religion.
Yes, and so the phylacteries I think I preached a
did,
year or
you
so
mentioned
ago about that was the mark that they would put on their
They put it on their shoulder or on their forehead.
on their forehead.
Based on a law in the Old Testament, in the Mosaic law, that said, write these laws and keep them before your eyes all the time. So they took it literally.
And
Okay,
they
I'm going to
did.
put a few scriptures, the Shema, I think it was, and a few others,
the Shema,
in a
yep.
box, stick it on my forehead, it's before my eyes all the time.
Yep,
So they're doing it literally.
yep.
All the while, they're not doing exactly what it says.
And so typically, it'd be a very tiny box
Yes.
their boxes
Let's go
were
super big.
ginormous, right?
Exactly. Which the fact that it even looked like it was religious is crazy to me, because you just think people if they were doing that today, you'd think they're an idiot.
It'd be crazy.
But yeah,
They love the place of honor at a banquet and the most important seat in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and be called a rabbi by others, but they are not to be called a rabbi. Now this is like Jesus has just cleared out the marketplace, and he's now calling them not to be called rabbi. For you have one teacher, and you are all brothers, and do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one father. So then Jesus goes into a whole piece here. Now Jesus has he's thrown the gauntlet down, and it's now on for young and old.
yes, yep.
And so at this point, Jesus he's praised the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. He's going, hey, I love your devotion. I love your obedience and your strength. It's part of your strength, actually. Your obedience is a great part of your
He
strength.
has said that in other places.
You know, they're preaching and their commitment to the text is amazing. But their dealings with other people and how they lead people and their expectations of people is just disgusting.
And Jesus would say, what's the point in knowing the Bible and not doing the Bible? Let's just bring it back to simple vernacular. That's what he's accusing them of. You guys know the Bible inside out, back to front. You'll say you even go ahead and tithe. You get your mint out of the garden, and you count your 10 you count 10 leaves of mint. You take one mint out and give it to the temple. That's how meticulous you are about some things, but you neglect the overall message, which is justice and the love of God.
And we might even think, mint's important. No, Jesus is making the point of Mint's not important.
Mint's not important.
But
That's
you'll
right.
even tithe your mint
Yes.
to the point of making sure that you've crossed your T's, dotted your I's, and you are doing everything for show.
Yep.
But there's no heart behind what you're doing, because what you're doing to the people
is
which is
crushing them with
what's
unbearable
important.
burdens. Exactly. Is it in this passage, in amongst these woes? I think it is. Yes, it is. It's immediately following the tithe. So this is verse 24. He says, blind guides, this is one of my favorites, blind guides, you strain your water so you won't accidentally swallow a gnat, but you swallow a camel.
Yeah.
So what Jesus is saying is you go out of the way to avoid, because gnats were an unclean animal to them. So just in case they might swallow a gnat, let's just make sure we strain our water. So you go to all this meticulous level. This is immediately following tithing mint.
Yep.
And he says, all the while, the fact that you're not caring for the vulnerable, you're actually eating you're eating an unclean camel.
Yeah.
You're as unclean as you could possibly be. It's a massive rhetorical device. It's a huge rebuke.
Yeah, they're missing the point.
Missing the point.
They're totally missing the point. And that's what Jesus is getting to.
Yeah.
You've missed the whole kingdom.
Yeah, and we can do this in church. We can go, oh, those people were disrupting our worship service and I didn't get anything. Or they might say, I didn't get anything out of the worship today.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. We've completely missed the point.
That message meant nothing to me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it might have meant something to someone else, so maybe go and encourage someone else.
Yes.
Exactly. All of that stuff.
Because what have we made it?
We've made it self-focused.
About me.
Exactly, and that's what these guys have
This
done.
whole piece, Jesus is saying, you self-righteous, and I could only imagine the rest of the language he was going to use.
Exactly.
But he made it. He's saying, you're self-righteous.
Yeah.
And these woes, before I say this next part, he's saying woes. And so these
woe
Pharisees,
as in, woe to you, kind of thing.
woe to you. And so these Pharisees, they're going, oh, Jesus is talking about woes. We know woes.
Yeah.
And so they start counting because they know woes. Isaiah had woes.
This is back on Monday I said, folks, you can listen to a little thing. I'm waiting to hear the rest of this because I've never heard this before. So tell me more, Shannon.
So here we go. So Isaiah had 6 woes.
That's
and
correct.
so they're counting and they're going, okay, woe 1, woe 2, woe 3, woe 4, woe 5, woe 6. Oh, okay, well, there's all the woes. And so those 6 woes represent sinful man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 6 in
The number of man.
in the number is man. And so woes, sin, so the sinful man. Okay, so Jesus is going, you sinful man. Okay, and so then just to really knock the nail on the coffin for this, he throws a 7th woe at them.
Right.
And which is completion. You have completed this.
So is there a sense in which he is saying Isaiah had 6 woes, you guys are actually the fulfillment of all those woes?
All those woes you have completed.
Right.
Basically.
Yes.
Like this is complete. You have completed.
Yep.
Like it's fulfilled, basically.
Maybe that's why he's able to say, and the blood of the judgment of all of them, all those who've gone before will fall on this generation.
Yeah.
Because they failed to recognize the coming of their Messiah.
Because at the end, let's just go to the last woe and read, woe to you, teachers of the law and the
there it is,
Pharisees.
right there. It's here.
You hypocrites, and we'll come back to hypocrites in just a moment. You build tombs for prophets.
I've never seen this.
And decorate the graves of the righteous.
Correct. So this is the 7th woe.
Yep.
And he's directly it's the light's just gone on for me.
Yep.
Okay, so just for our listeners, so this 7th woe he's now going to sum up all of the Old Testament and all of the persecution of all of God's people, and he's going to thrust it on this generation and say, you guys are the fulfillment of all of the things that have been anti-God throughout time.
Yep.
Okay.
You say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Mm-hmm. So he's calling them hypocrites. He's saying, I'm now saying this is fulfilled. Mm-hmm. You were. He's calling them fully out.
Yes.
And then he's saying, you know what? It's done.
Yep, it's done now.
It's now done.
All the judgment against God's people is about to be fulfilled in this seventh woe.
Yep.
Yep.
There's
something. There's going to be. I'm going to dig into this more after this podcast because you've hit on something here that I've never seen before. I've often wondered about this passage and why is he holding this generation accountable? But now that makes sense.
Yeah. So I feel like I haven't copied one of the verses over. I haven't. Hang on. Let me finish it off. I've just got to jump over.
Is your iPad going flat or are you?
No, it's all good. Let me just jump across to the Bible app. Okay. So let's read on. Okay. Where did I finish off? I finished off at 31. Is that right?
About then, yes.
Yep. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. He is saying to them, I know what you're about to do to me. Go ahead
and do it.
Yeah. He's calling them out.
Yep.
He knows what's about to happen. He's saying he's summed it up for them. And they know. They know what they're about to do.
Yeah, that's right.
They've already been plotting against him.
Yeah, exactly. They're looking for an opportunity.
And he's called them out. This is absolutely like it's amazing.
And then he calls them snakes, sons of vipers. That is clearly
you snakes.
So that is clearly a reference to sons of vipers. He's basically calling them sons of the devil here.
Yeah.
He's saying you guys. It's a direct reference to the garden snake. No doubt about that.
Totally. You will. How will you escape being condemned to hell? I mean, when I say Jesus is showing up for a fight here, like these again, when we say he's not holding back a punch, he's not holding back a punch. Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town, and so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah's son of Berechiah. Whom
he was the last prophet. So basically it's the first prophet to the last prophet.
Yep. Who you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come on this generation. This is massive. Like they would have been at that point finding rocks.
Yeah. It's deeply accusatory.
Like they were at this point, they were if they hadn't worked out how they were going to kill him at that point.
Well, the only thing that was stopping him at this point was the crowds.
And what we need to realize, the only people that actually could kill him on a cross were the Romans.
Yeah.
They were the only ones that could crucify him.
Exactly. The only people who could legally kill him. Yeah.
Now, at this point, he hasn't done anything that they could stone him to death on.
No.
So he hasn't blasphemed.
Yep.
He hasn't done anything that they're going, we can't stone him. We can't. We've got nothing
two things
on
you can
him.
stone a person for: adultery and blasphemy. The only two things in the Mosaic law.
And he hasn't blasphemed here.
No.
And so what are we going to do?
Yeah.
We
can't call him out on it.
We can't call him out. The
crowds will riot. John's gospel tells us they won't go. We need to kill him, but we can't do it during the Passover because the crowds will riot, is what it says.
Yeah.
So when they finally can do it in the middle of the night and hopefully get it all wrapped up first thing in the morning before the crowds, that's why they take the opportunity.
That's what they do.
But they weren't intending on doing it during this time because of this very real threat that they knew that it potentially would backfire on them.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this. Because this seems to be pretty harsh words from Jesus. So maybe our listeners are hearing this and you're struggling to reconcile this as how can gracious Jesus speak this way?
He's calling out, and it comes back to the word hypocrite, which is, we hear the word hypocrite and we put it to our context. And I used earlier in the week, context is king.
Yep.
So hypocrite back in the day is actor. You actors, you are acting out what you should be devoted to. If you were devoted to doing what was right here, you would not be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
You're all for show, and you're not actually doing what you're called to do.
Yeah.
If you were the true high priest, you would have relieved the burdens of the people.
Exactly.
And you would have them living in freedom.
Yep.
You would not be putting the burdens on them that you've put on them.
So is it right then to say that this passion, this anger, is not coming from a sense of his own ego being hurt by these people? It's the passion and the anger that's just seen him turn tables, that's just seeing him call them whitewashed tombs and snakes and sons of vipers and all of that. It's coming from this deep-seated anger that the people who were supposed to represent him to others have abused that power, and that's what Jesus is angry about.
They have abused the power that they are supposed to represent. They are supposed to be representing him and the Father.
So that helps people when to wrestle with this, because apart from that context, you're saying context is king. Apart from that context, you can be left thinking, wow, this seems pretty harsh of Jesus. But when we understand that it's actually his love or his zeal. John's gospel says it was his zeal for the house, quoting the Old Testament. His zealousness for justice, which is such at the heart of God. And justice by meaning bringing God's values, the equality, all people are treated with dignity. No one should be ruling it over another. And when that is what hasn't happened, especially from those who'd said they would do it and haven't done it, that's where he's angry.
And that's how they basically get to crucify him, because the only people that get crucified are in that day would be the zealots.
Yes, because they were causing an uprising against Rome, basically.
That's right. And so what we would call a terrorist today, they're the only ones being crucified. Yep. And so the zeal that he shows here is he's a zealot.
Yeah.
He must be a zealot.
Yep.
And so it's the convincing...
Except he's not speaking against Rome. He's speaking against the religious authorities.
The religious authorities. But it's the corruption here in the high priest of it's... And then into Rome of we need to get rid of him.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jesus is at this point going, you've destroyed what was supposed to be good. You've taken what I wanted for the people and what I'd entrusted into you, and you've turned it into almost a show.
Yep.
And you've used it for your benefit.
That's right.
And your privilege.
Yep.
And you've not passed on. And instead of even giving hope or lightening the burden, you've actually doubled down on it.
Yes. And the irony of that is, if we often think people don't understand the ministry of the Old Testament prophet, because we've been led to think that because the New Testament quotes it in the birth of Jesus, the prophet Isaiah prophesied about his coming and all that sort of stuff. We often think that the primary role of the Old Testament prophet is to foretell the future. That's actually not what the prophet's job was. The prophets were... they were covenant. What does Marty call it on Bama podcast? They were covenant enforcers. Their job was to hold those in power, hold the people accountable to what they had promised to do.
Yep.
Which was live by the Mosaic law, to care for the foreigner or the widow, to bring justice, to live a different nation.
Yeah, the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner.
And the orphan. Yep, that's the four. Yeah, the poor, the widow, the foreigner, and the orphan. The vulnerable. And so they had said yes to that and they weren't doing it. So if you go back and read the Old Testament prophets through that lens, you'll see that there is a forward prophetic component, but it's always linked to a justice on that generation, a judgment on that generation, because you guys haven't done this and the people are suffering. And that's where the forward hopeful link comes in. But one day there will be one who come from the line of David, who will be a king, who will bring justice. And so that's why people clung to it. But it was always because each generation was failing to do that. So now Jesus is calling this generation who are in that same situation. They're in the positions of power, and he's operating like an Old Testament prophet. He's calling them on that behavior, and he's actually saying, you guys actually have the nerve and the gall to say that you're not like those prophets because you build tombs for them to honor them. Oh, what a great job Isaiah and Zechariah did. And you don't realize, you fail to realize you're actually just like them.
Yep.
That's what he's saying. You're actually doing the very things those prophets were speaking against. You have become exactly what they were speaking against, and then you've got the gall to say, "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I was there."
Yeah.
And he's saying, "Yes, you would do it, and you are doing it, and you have done it."
Yeah.
And so he's calling
and if
them
not
on it.
worse.
And if not worse, yeah. Well, worse in the sense that they haven't recognized the ultimate coming, the one who was going to come, who would fulfill. As Jesus came over the hill a few days before, he wept over Jerusalem, and he said, if you had realized what was happening, if you had realized that this was the time of your visitation, that I am the fulfillment of all of that, maybe you would have been escaped what was going to happen to you. But the time, because you haven't recognized that, the fall of Jerusalem, Jesus directly links the fall 30-odd years later, 40 years later, to the fact they didn't recognize his coming.
Yeah. And I look back at that and I go, is that because he wept? Because he's seen that the kingdom was here and they couldn't see it.
They didn't see it. Yeah, exactly.
The kingdom of God was right there in front of them.
Yeah.
And they couldn't see it.
No. He's pretty angry at that. Now, I've got a book in front of me, a book that I read some years ago. I think I've mentioned it once or twice on the podcast over the last couple of years. It was quite a revolutionary book for me. It's called Accidental Pharisees. It's by Larry Osborne. And what it did was it turned the whole narrative of the Pharisees and the religious elite on their head. And because we have this propensity, and we're even doing it to some degree today. I mean, it's true. Jesus is being pretty narky towards them, and justifiably so. But we have this same tendency to do what these religious people were doing and going, I wouldn't be like the old ones. And we have that same mentality to go, I wouldn't be like the Pharisees. But the point of this book is the accidental Pharisee is that if we're not careful, we all become this.
We can so easily do that.
So when we read Jesus' rebukes of Pharisees throughout the Gospels, rather than just imagining ourselves sitting on Jesus' side going, yeah, Jesus, you give it to him, we need to allow those words to front up to those words and go, assume that I'm a Pharisee and go, what is that? What are those words showing me about what is wrong in my life?
That could be us.
Exactly.
In 12 months.
It doesn't take long. That's right. Especially if we start to believe our own press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where, we have a younger generation coming up. What opportunities are we going to allow that young generation? We might say, they're not ready yet.
Problem with young people today.
We will make every excuse under the sun.
Yeah, good point.
Oh, well, you know what? I didn't get opportunities until I was much older.
I had to do the hard yards.
They'll have to wait for their time.
Yeah.
Right? We'll make all the
attitude.
It totally is.
Yeah.
But you know what? Their time is right now as well.
Yeah.
So there is enough room in the kingdom.
Totally.
The's always been enough room.
Need. Yeah, exactly.
Because guess what? Young people will reach young people.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? I'm old enough. I won't say an age, but I'm old enough to reach the age that I'm at.
That's right.
Right.
We need a young generation. We've got to let the young ones go.
We need every generation doing their thing.
Give them a go.
And so if we can so easily slip into that same thinking, and if we do that, the church will shrivel up.
It'll atrophy. Yep, that's right.
And that's not kingdom thinking.
No. And it's not just even young people, it's young Christians. Sometimes the best evangelists, they need to sort of go to Bible college before they start telling their friends about Jesus. By the time you get to Bible college, you don't have many friends outside of Jesus. So you're better off just letting people have a crack. I mean, that's what they were doing. They were going, come and see a person who told me everything I ever did.
Here's the thing. I just want to say this. The disciples were young.
Yes.
They were kids.
Yes.
In fact, if you really want to know, some of them were probably 13.
Yeah.
They hadn't left mum and dad's home yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's culture, Rabbi. That were young boys.
What it was. Peter, the oldest, was probably 17 on the
he might have just got married, something.
And that's...
And that was normal in that culture.
And that was the culture back then. Now, am I saying that the 13-year-old in our church should be up preaching on a Sunday. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, the point being, I think you're trying to make is that we've got to give people a go.
We've got to give. Yeah. We've got to give people a
Otherwise, we become Pharisaical. As we wrap this up, I'm thinking about one of the most confronting passages. It gets a chuckle, but it also it makes me reflect. Is Jesus' words early in this passage where he says they're like whitewashed tombs.
Yeah.
Outside, looking all clean. Inside, full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. And what they would do in that day is they would actually take tombs and they would paint them in whitewash because Jewish law didn't allow for any. If you walked across a grave, you were unclean. So they made real sure that no one would walk across a grave. So knowing that, by painting it white. So knowing that, that's what Jesus is saying. On the outside, you look like you've got it all together, but what's going on inside your heart is so twisted. It's dead men's bones and everything unclean.
Yeah.
That's stark to me. While it's a beautiful metaphor that really gets you thinking, we've got to go, okay, if I can look the part on the outside, but if I'm not believing in another generation, like you're saying, if I'm not looking out and championing the vulnerable and the young and the weak and elevating others rather than trying to keep them down, I will have death on the inside of me, and that's what will come out. So it's quite confronting. I'll tell you a story as we close. I was in Israel back in 2018, and we were in the church of the Nativity in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, and had a couple of guys with us in the trip, and they knew the rules. You don't go into church without, you don't go into the holy part of the church without with shorts on, because you have out of respect. And we taught that, and it was a really hot day. It was like 35 degrees or something. And they said, oh, no, we won't worry about going in. We'll just sit in the foyer area, right? Because they just decided they wouldn't worry about it. So as we're walking in, there's a priest on guard. Literally, I describe him as being on guard with a scowling look on his face. And these guys weren't even coming into the area where they couldn't go. And he starts pointing at them and scowling at them. And it was in a different language, but it didn't matter what language it was in. You knew what he was saying, right? And he was pointing and scowling and said, it's really clear. You can't come in here, you filthy heathen, that kind of thing, right? It was really the level of hatred and animosity. There was no grace in it. So Rohan gets a little bit fired up by this. And so I walk over to these guys and I open up Matthew 23. And I don't know if the guy could hear me or not, or understood what I was saying or not. But I started reading Matthew 23 rather loud. Woe to you, you blind guides. You stop people from entering the kingdom of heaven. You yourself don't enter, and Rohan was a little fired up. I don't know what this man thought, but it was the living epitome of what Jesus was. And this is a person inside one of the most holiest churches in the world claiming to represent Jesus and not letting... I mean, okay, show some respect, but hey, if a person walks in... What happened? You talked yesterday about a lady in a bikini in a brothel in Amsterdam. If she wants, what would Jesus do?
Jesus is going to accept her.
Exactly.
Like they throw the woman in front of Jesus.
Totally.
We've caught her in adultery. And what does Jesus do? He draws a line in the sand and says, anyone that hasn't sinned, cross the line. Yeah. And they all walk away. Yeah. And Jesus forgives her. Mm-hmm. Now, if that is not our example.
That's the example. But the thing is, we can all fall into this. The person who walks into church that looks different, smells different, doesn't, behave, disrupts or whatever.
Is that not the party we want?
That's the party we want. Yeah, exactly. And if we can change our mindset from everything needing to be prim and proper to going, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus say? I know it's cliche, but it's the heart of the gospel that came to seek and save that which is lost. And so let's be those kind of people, folks.
Yep. Mm. I want to be in the church where we can't leave something on a seat.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
If that's
Jill,
the church.
Jill often says that if there isn't an ashtray at the front door of the church, it's probably not reaching the right people. That kind of. We've got to. You shouldn't be able to leave your purse lying around on the front seat, ladies. Nope. That's exactly the point. Yeah. So let's be that kind of church. Let's not be religious and uppity. Let's be gracious and loving and reflect the heart of Jesus that came to seek and save that which is lost. Anything else you want to share?
No, that's it. That's
All right, folks. Well, thanks
That's
for
all.
being with us, and thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll talk to everyone next week.